As far as the history of baseball goes, the game has surely seen its fair share of weird and crazy characters. But ask any fan from the 70s and 80s, and they'll all point to one man as the undisputed baseball weirdo and the strangest character in his days. Of course, it's none other than the Mad Hungarian. This man was nothing short of a menace on the mound, and surprisingly, he was at the center of some of the most intense brawls in baseball history. But luckily, he had the skill set to match his insane alter ego. Oh, and we haven't even mentioned his famous psych-up routine that well. Let's just say it's unlike anything you've ever seen before. But despite all the on-field shenanigans, the man was a legendary figure back in the day and one of the scariest pitchers the game has ever seen. Here's the crazy story of the Mad Hungarian, and you can bet your bottom dollar that this is one hell of a story you don't want to miss. Well, this larger-than-life character didn't just emerge as the Mad Hungarian. No, and to understand how he managed to pick up this tag along the way, we need to take a look at where it all began. Hrabosky was born on the 21st of July 1949 in Oakland, California, and yes, that's his birth name. His rather unusual last name comes from his parents who were Hungarian immigrants. But then Alan, or Hrabosky as he's popularly called, was born and raised in California. For Hrabosky, his love and passion for the game were all developed at a young age, and by the time he got to high school, he was already showing real potential. He played high school baseball for his alma mater, Savannah High School in Anaheim, California, where he got noticed and was originally drafted by the Minnesota Twins in the 11th round of the 1967 amateur draft. But certainly, his baseball talents weren't the only thing Hrabosky had developed from a young age. He had also sharpened his business skills because, get this, the young man wasn't all that impressed by his suitors. He turned down the offer and refused to sign with the club. Now, would you believe that? A high school player passing on the opportunity to sign with a Major League Baseball team. It all seemed insane, but then that's just Hrabosky for you. After the saga of 1967, Hrabosky had to wait 2 more years to get another opportunity. But then, it seems he had grown nicely in that period because this time he signed with the Cardinals, who had made him their #1 pick in the 1969 draft. Fresh out of putting pen to paper on his first ever pro baseball career, Hrabosky, like other stars, had to first learn the trade in the minor leagues. However, the young Californian native was quick to impress with his fierce pitches that obviously didn't go unnoticed by his new employers. So less than a year into his contract, the young pitcher was already primed and ready for his major league debut at the tender age of 20. And when it finally came, it was on the 17th of June 1970, when he managed a scoreless inning as a relief pitcher against the San Diego Padres. At that moment, the future seemed so bright for the young man. However, the fact that life in the majors can sometimes be cruel and unrelenting meant that success wasn't to come immediately for him. In fact, Hrabosky didn't see much action as he might have felt he deserved that season, and the trend even continued into the following seasons. Also, it didn't help that his production dropped off soon after, with an ERA that barely qualified as average. Something was definitely wrong somewhere. In an interview much later, he would admit he suffered from a lack of concentration, which made sense because the young man's talent was never in question. However, he needed to do something about it, and he needed to do it real soon if he would have any chance to save his career that was beginning to head nowhere. And that was when it clicked, the very discovery that would change his life forever. Up until this time, Hrabosky's seemingly bright career had taken a turn for the worse and was heading downhill quickly. And as if things weren't bad enough already, his above-4 ERA average in the 74 season meant he was on the verge of being demoted back to the minors by the Cardinals, who were already ready to cut their losses. But anxious for a change of fortune and clinging on to the hope of still remaining in the major leagues, Hrabosky decided to adopt a psych-up routine to help him focus more. It was in a game against the Los Angeles Dodgers on August 9, 1974, that he first wielded his newfound psych-up weapon. And just like a magical snap of the fingers, the legend of the Mad Hungarian was born. You see, his newfound psych-up routine was unlike anything ever seen before in the MLB. Before a pitch, the unrelenting pitcher would turn his back on the batter, stare at the crowd, walk towards second base, then come to an abrupt stop. He would then take a deep breath while rubbing vehemently on the ball, slam it against his mitt, turn around, and advance back to the mound, staring dead into the batter's eyes. It was all so melodramatic, and his Fu Manchu mustache and fierce look made it all the more scarier for batters. However, the effectiveness of the whole routine depended on whether it would work on its first ever trial, and it didn't help that he was up against Steve Garvey, who was one of the top hitters back in the day. Thankfully, 3 innings later, Hrabosky had avoided a single hit against the season's MVP. His unorthodox psych-up strategy, coupled with his aggressive pitches, had worked out perfectly, and that moment marked the turning point for the Mad Hungarian. Alhrabosky's pre-pitch antic was a hit, and in no time he was making a name for himself as one of the best relief pitchers in the game. He unsurprisingly also became a fan favorite for the same reason, and any thought of sending him back to the minors was now all but forgotten. The Mad Hungarian had truly come to stay. When the 1975 season came along, Hrabosky took the league by storm, dominating hitters and entertaining the fans who often roared in delight whenever he put on his show. At the end of the season, the numbers told the whole story. The Mad Hungarian had led the National League in saves with a total of 22, while also posting a career high in wins and managing an ERA of 1.67. These stellar numbers earned him the Fireman of the Year award and sealed his status as the league's most feared reliever. He would then go on to have another outstanding season in 1976, before unfortunately losing the favor of his new coach in 1977 after a pretty public disagreement about his looks. However, he still went on to have one of his best career games that season after he struck out 3 Cincinnati Reds hitters to steal the game right at the end of an ABC Monday Night Baseball game. But then, his issues with Vern Rapp, who was his coach at the time, meant his days with the Cardinals were numbered. Before the 1978 season, Hrabosky was traded to the Kansas City Royals, where he hit the ground running almost immediately. His 2 seasons with the Royals were impressive, however, it was his first that really stood out. At the end of the 78 season, the Mad Hungarian managed 20 saves from 75 innings while posting an ERA of 2.88. His impressive performance also helped the team to the AL Championship Series, where they ultimately lost to the New York Yankees. After a relatively successful 2-year stint with the Royals, he then signed with the Atlanta Braves as a free agent. But this time, it seems the Braves only got the Hungarian without his signature madness, because not only was he much calmer now, but even his famed psych-up routine seemed less effective. In his own words, "My mystique was what made me successful, and now that he'd lost it, Hrabosky struggled to get game time and could barely impress whenever he was thrown into the mix." On August 18, 1982, he featured in a game against the Montreal Expos, and if there was any doubt left that the man was done, it quickly evaporated after a poor performance in the game that ultimately turned out to be the last of his career. The club released him about 2 weeks later, and that was a wrap career-wise for the man, the legend, Alhrabosky. Now, let's talk about his crazy side. For modern-day baseball fans wondering just how mad the Mad Hungarian was, well, no one knew for sure. But one thing was certain, and it was the fact that he never shied away from a confrontation, regardless of who or what was charging at him, although he did most of the charging himself and not the other way around. He generated so much controversy that you'd never believe this nightmarish character was only 5'11". One time, this eccentric figure even got into it with the home plate umpire in a game, and the two ended up throwing balls back and forth at each other in what can only be best described as an insane scene. Another time, he lashed out at a reporter, and it took the intervention of people around to prevent the situation from escalating into a good old push and shove brawl. Luckily, his controversies were mostly on the diamond and weren't career-threatening. Although he did get suspended one time by the Cardinals for insubordination and undermining his coach's authority. No doubt, the Mad Hungarian was truly a piece of work, even on his good days. And although he insists it was all part of his tactics, you could almost always count on Hrabosky to produce something extra every game day. Today, Hrabosky's a TV personality serving as a broadcaster for the Cardinals games, and he's much less ferocious too, as you'd have guessed. But then, the legend of the Mad Hungarian is one that can never be forgotten. Not by the baseball world, not by his fans, and certainly not by the hitters he terrorized back in his day.